I was sitting there for over 6 hours with chest pain. I have congestive heart failure, so it was a very critical condition. And they had not seen me by 1 o'clock that morning, so I went ahead and walked out.
What was the scene? Can you set the scene, the scenario where there's just a handful?
There was over 180 people waiting that night.
How'd you count that up?
Because they told me, because I was complaining about the wait time. And they said there was 4 other chest pain patients who had been there since 3 o'clock that evening, and it was already 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and they were still sitting in the ER.
Have you been before to the ER?
No, this was my first visit to this ER ever.
And what's your takeaway?
I don't want to go back because I could be dying and they're just going to leave me sitting in the waiting room. And that's how I truly feel. I had took an extra fluid pill of mine and it kind of brought some of symptoms down. But my symptoms flared up about 3 or 4 days later and it got worse. And I wound up calling the EMS and actually going back, and they admitted me right then to the hospital. That's how bad my condition truly was.
Well, we initially decided to go because she had blood clots in her urine. And keep in mind, she's only 2.5 years old. So it's a really big concern when you go to check her urine and that's what you find laying in the floor.
So then what happened?
I decided to get her up, get her dressed, take her to Mission. They get her through triage. They tell me that pediatrics have been going in and out, so I should be there in no time. Come about 8 hours later, we're still sitting there before we even get taken back to a room.
What were your emotions as the hours ticked by?
Very frustrating. I was starting to get angry. I think actually at one point in time she was so upset because she was hurting so bad that I was in tears with her because there was nothing that I could do. So
To speed it up.
Mm-hmm.
We love you. Love you, Mom. My mother is 76 years old. She suffers from dementia, rheumatoid arthritis, kidney failure. She's currently with in-home hospice care. She was not eating or drinking for several days, so I thought it was important to take her to the ER and find out why. I called for an ambulance transport for the specific reason to keep her in a lying down position. She's too weak to sit up. I told the ambulance driver, I said, look, I've got to go home and get some paperwork. I'll be about 15 minutes behind you. When I arrived at the ER, they had her sitting up in a wheelchair. She was slumped over forward in such a position that she could have fallen out of the chair in the floor. And I became angry. I asked 4 different people, including the ER supervisor. I said, my mother is too weak to stay in an upright position. She needs to lay down. Do you have a gurney that she can lay on? The answer I got 4 different times was, well, we're working to get her back as soon as we possibly can. She was forced to sit upright for an hour and a half. All I was asking for, can she please lay down? The reason I'm here is because I don't want to see anyone else that's elderly, weak, maybe too sick to sit upright, to sit in the waiting area and be forced to sit in an upright position for an extended period of time when they're suffering and they're in pain. I called Mission Hospital 3 different times to let them know what my experience was. The first 2 times I got a recording. They said that to explain what the problem was and they would call me back, which they never called me back. The 3rd time I demanded to speak to the hospital administrator. The lady that I spoke to said, we don't have a hospital administrator per se. This is the administration department. I said, okay, fine, I'll talk to you then. She said, well, you know, we have a special line for this type of thing. Let me change you over. I got to the same recording that I called the first 2 times. Never got a response from the hospital.
Well, don't we all? But you have dementia?
Very, After
Did they lose them?
Yes, they were gone. And I said, you guys had them. You know, it was in your care. I left them on the shelf. They never found them. So I had to keep pushing with the patient advocate. And
Did they try to deny they lost them?
they tried to shift some of the blame on me. And I thought that was some of the legalese that was going on. I think they were kind of led to try and flush, you know, something out of me. And I was very adamant about it, you know, where I'd left them. And I told them point blank where I'd left them. They cost to replace about $10,000. He was discharged finally out of Transylvania Regional on May the 6th on a Friday. We didn't get new hearing aids for him from Miracle Ear until May 26th. So it was not only during his 3-week stay during the hospital and during rehab that everybody had to speak louder to him, but even 2 weeks after being released from the hospital, he still was doing without his hearing aids. They finally worked it out. They were trying to ascertain who's going to pay for this. They told me that they ended up splitting it between the emergency room and the 4th floor, which was their neurology ward.